Okay, so I believe that what you want is a sort of recounting. It's the third stage, right? The first stage was just a perusal. I was just listening to the information, taking notes, maybe making some sort of technical notations, especially understanding that it was discussing communist brainwashing and that it was describing techniques that I recognized as the kind of torture that had been used on me. But the second time, there was actually some sort of automation that was underbedding, or was rather in the subtext of what was going on while I was listening to it. As if what I understand frequently happens. I find something, and then I begin to look at it or I begin to review it. Then I put it away for a while for a variety of different reasons. And when I come back to it, somebody who's been spying on me has found it and they've hooked something up with it. And usually it involves the same kind of automation, including the same kind of automation that has a particular kind of racialization to it. And the understanding is that after all this time of observing me in this situation, I've already created my own manners in which to identify these kinds of racialized triggers and these sexist triggers and these other things that I understand are connected to diversions for criminal activity. And I respond the way I do. And at some point, I believe what I'm supposed to do is demonstrate that I understand somebody else is disappointed with the way I respond. That I'm supposed to assimilate into performing in the particular racialized manner that's been ascribed to me. And when I don't, there's disappointment. And so that creates justification for kicking me out of the circuit at that point and then sending me to the back of the line to do it over again, i.e., racketeering, right? But we don't want to talk about it like racketeering. What do we want to talk about it? Behavioral sciences. Okay, well, behavioral sciences is one way to describe it. And they're trying to, as acculturate people or habituate people, normalize people to seeing it as if it has some sort of scientific validity. But my concern, especially after this came my way, was that maybe at another point in time, there was a different understanding. Does that understanding change based upon the attribution of the source origin? And is that one of the reasons why there's so much pressure on us to relinquish our own identity? Accede to a expropriation of our human capital and or what would otherwise be called our abstract labor so that somebody else can claim it, and then we are supposed to demonstrate the next stage of relinquishing our own rights to ownership of the means of our own production by allowing for them to characterize us, including in a manner we may be able to identify as actually the expropriated property of somebody else, but just accede to accepting it as our own for that time. I don't know. I might not be correct. Let's see what we've got here. I'm just going to I haven't read it in a while. What do you think was going on? So this was something I listened to on November 21st, 2020. I'm just going to read it as it says. Some of this is quoted, and then some of it's my comments. Communist brainwashing, compelling people to admit they committed crimes they did not. Did Harvard think it was cute in redating my article to be on the anniversary of this radio broadcast? You know, it would qualify for retirement at this age. Why did they not say 2007 before I got kidnapped? We did. That's a quote. That's just kind of the feedback that was going on while I was typing these comments. So are you still spying on me and not speaking directly to me? What was it that we have to talk about? You are still not fucking talking, are you? Let me ask, did Daniel Pearl lie about being a Jew? Did he have to confess to a crime he did not commit? If I conceded that I lied about being a Jew, does that mean that I did not commit the crime of being a Jew? Is that what I did not understand? That you were offering me a chance to come clean, confess, and hence clear myself of the charge? Quote, acceptable to their captors. So did someone try to trigger an etheric memory of the technique and then offer succor or some form of support in the form of drugs and hypnosis? Who was I already connected to via an illicit biometric or other account who may have had conscious understanding of these techniques and or actually been subjected to them? Direct brutality versus persuasive techniques. How does it affect someone to be subjected to electronic torture when it is denied as being torture? How about persuasive or coercive techniques involving infrasonic messaging when it is intentionally misrepresented as being about a hallucination that itself is evidence of a illness as opposed to interrogation or torture? How about acts of actual sabotage of people's natural psychic or extrasensory capabilities by interfering with cultivation or confirmation of them, and instead engaging acts of insertion of memes connected to redirection that also correlates with intentional misrepresentation of information in order to make one doubt their own capability to discern reality? No one is ever arrested. Why have I never been arrested despite being threatened with arrest? Protocol for presentation at court, or monograph for programming others. It helps if those others might have a memory of the archetype subject upon which that monograph was prepared. Demonstrations of social conditioning and habituation connected to having to witness acts engaged upon others in community without being addressed directly. He is taken and isolated. No furniture. See what you can get and then watch someone else monetize it. And nothing to do. See what she does when you continue to electronically torture her and see how she engages with her captor. Total isolation and complete uncertainty. Most potent weapon in the hands of the police. Those are quotes. Anxiety. Responses to cues for anxiety and pressured speech over time. What does it do to a voice modulation and frequency alteration? Can one adjust levels on remote telemedication regimes based upon exacerbation of anxious behavior with redirection and or dissonance caused by reconfiguring information previously presented? Sleep disturbances, like knowing that someone wakes themselves up when subjected to broadcasts of pornographic activity. See if you can get them to report the dream and then speculate on demonstrations of accuracy, especially if someone's past patient notes on that person has hedged on clairvoyant, and you have access to some means, like the use of the word germane, by which demonstrations of clairvoyance actually have currency. Erudite psychiatric theory. Exploit the need of the prisoner to talk. Gathering for the background. Certainly mixed creation of new products aimed at weaponization efforts involved with forced cybernetics put onto political opposition in order to reinforce social ostracization based upon projection of fear in encountering that person later on. Sign the protocol, or monograph, is leveraged to say that they consented to the medication. He knows full well that something he has done has been interpreted as a crime against the state. End quote. Without charges, then what sort of crime can justify such treatment in the U.S.? Loyalty? 6 weeks to 3 months. Time for a quarterly report. We'll have to go through it again if you do retract it. Like saying it was fraud involving the agency that was billed for services and was connected to alleged provision of services, including ones that would be billed via referral, as opposed to treatment, and then express my loyalty by demonstrations of gratitude, constitute a menace to the state, like making sure you take care of yourself and do not attempt to engage in any political organizing because you are traumatized and disabled. And it is okay for you to take time out for yourself and or acculturate you to political expression in a form of identity that comports with the requirements regarding demonstrations of loyalty. Keeping a suspect under surveillance for several months and letting him know his friends and associates are being seized. That's a quote. That's what they did. Probably has a different implication when you can revile former associates in the isolation regime and allow for them to be presented as politically and otherwise successful, or at least able to exist, while you are continuously put into currents of having to witness murders of people who previously would have been considered political opposition that you would have contested via ordinary political process, like perhaps running against them for political office, or challenging them at trial, or submitting editorials or exposés for publication after investigation. Inefficiency and ineffectiveness on the part of the frustration of the police officer, as in you are supposed to be concerned about their workers' rights after you have had no job and you are committed to justice for workers. Not even Stockholm Syndrome, unless drawn down on derivatives using the Swedish pension system for their benchmark pegging. Viva la Mexico. Interrogator in relationship with person. What about if they are building rapport by being brutal, including physical restraint and threats in one moment, and then trying to elicit a joke in the next? Public trials are the extreme exception. Only a very small part of prisoners are ever brought to public trial. If the state police are pretty well convinced that nothing will be said at this trial that will upset the whole plan, as many as 1 or 2% at the most. Difference in treatment for prisoners going to court and coming up for courts-martial in prisoner of war camps. Military proceedings of the Chinese versus North Korean. Not strictly comparable to the Eastern European police methods, which we have described. Actually, the fundamental attitude toward the prisoner and the fundamental decision that this man, once he has been adjudged either a criminal against the state or a war criminal, the interoperability of his decision, despite anything the prisoner might say, is common to both, but the methods might differ. Most who are criminals against the state are suspected of political crimes and are handled by the state police. Military tribunals, merely SOP, standard operating procedure, doing things a certain way because this was the only way they knew how to do them. This is not written out, but this is a customary way of being done and has always been done and in effect is a SOP. Physical violence is not officially condoned. It does occur when the interrogator gets frustrated, but in general, it is not condoned. Said American, then it was corrected to Russian or Chinese. So in the course of saying it, he said originally American, but then he corrected himself and said Russian or Chinese. Difference between pre-communist and post-communist. Brainwashing, brain reform, confession extraction. That was how they would describe it. Many of the police officers who have what amounts to an emotional fervor for communism, they display to the prisoner a patent idealism, which I must say is sometimes most attractive to him, and has great influence and dedication to the ideas that are ostensibly about communism and are greatly influential in accusing the prisoner to accept some of their rationalizations. Impressing, like what they do with gang recruitment. Now the point there is that you have a political dissident who might be a socialist, a communist, but their understanding of their own political analysis was inappropriate. That prisoner is subjected to a version of their own political ideology and their own context. That is the suitable expression. You're not a leftist. You're not an American. You're not committed to social justice. You don't want to help people with their healthcare treatment. You don't want to assure racial equality. You don't want to end economic exploitation. We do. And you need to act like us. And you need to show us that you've given us command in order for you to be accepted. You think you're a communist? You think you understand what communism is? No, we understand. We sympathize with you. We've been in that position before. But that was part one.